that a James Bond photo, Lugando, from the Bond films? From Bug to Bond, maybe? Cool. Hey, Artem. H. Hart. Kagieta, welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome. Wow, you got draw games of 1753. Awesome job, Anthony. That's great. A cold Yorkshire. Welcome, welcome. I grew up in the state of Wisconsin in the United States, south of the Canadian border. So when I was a kid in winter, my dad would, like when it was 40 below, from a Fahrenheit perspective, he would boil water and would throw it outside, and not a drop would hit the ground, just all steam. And so I appreciate good chess weather. Let's put it that way. Anthony, you're from Canada. At the recent chess.com staff meetup, I had the pleasure to meet Anna Kramling. And I thought, what can I say to Anna that she's never heard before? Because I'm sure she's heard everything under the sun a million times already. And I said, oh, I met your mother when you were about 1 or 2 years old in Kapuskasing, Ontario, Canada. And I think a lot of Canadians might struggle to put Kapuskasing, Ontario on the map. And so she had a good laugh. And actually, my father and I travel to Canada every year, and we play in the Canadian Open. And for 2 years in a row, I was in Kapuskasing, Ontario. Not a hotbed for chess, but or not traditionally known to be a hotbed for chess, but it did occur, and several grandmasters from all over the world played, including Pia Kremlin, well before Anna was well known. Greetings from France. Cool, cool. Okay, so great seeing everybody. I'm gonna get rolling here in just a couple minutes. If you're not in part of our chess.com Improvers Club, I just shared a link there. I am particularly active in the Ask Coach community forum. I just made a post asking for anyone that's comfortable to either share there or send me a direct message on chess.com. I'm Fishwich, or my email, Dane at chess.com. It's like that. If you just have any, I know it's a little bit early in the sense that there's still another month, but I'm working on an article where I'm going to be highlighting notable achievements, sharing experience regarding journey, people, identifying their journey on the road to chess improvement. And so if anyone that feels comfortable sharing their experience so far, things you've learned, how if you noticed any big rating gains, or you found some qualitative gains in your chess, like finding yourself handling time pressure or whatever, you name it. Happy to hear from anyone. Just wanted to throw the shout out there. Would appreciate any stories anyone's comfortable sharing. Okay, so welcome everybody. Today we have kind of a jam-packed schedule. This is by popular demand. We discussed CoachChamps Part 2. I'm not going to focus exclusively on CoachChamps today. I want to make sure I share a couple of examples, but Lugando had no idea when he played this awesome move that's far from obvious if you haven't seen it before. And even if you've seen it, it's still like a strange thing. I didn't get to watch CoachChamps live, but while I was working, I noticed a video feed and I saw Lugando playing, and I clicked it for a second. And it was like right when he played this interesting move. And since I've seen that move, and I had seen it before, but it reminded me, this is a really cool idea. I see it everywhere now. And so we're going to see the move I'm talking about. It's a unique concept. And so we're going to spend some time on that. Before we do, Kagieto, I'll continue to butcher your username, so apologies. I know you really wanted to highlight one of your games, and I think it's a wonderful game for us to use as a warm-up, and then we're going to shift to the main lesson today. But Kagieto was playing in CoachChamps. He played a brilliant first game, and then unfortunately lost his rook under pressure. And so that left a very negative feeling. As we all know, you have a great game and then the wheels come off at the last moment. You can really go on tilt, and so he did a wonderful job resurfacing. And after the big setback, where ultimately the person that defeated him in round one actually won the whole tournament. And he was completely winning. And so that was a very tough thing to deal with. And he did a great job resurfacing and played a really good game. So I just thought, as a warm-up, I'm going to share his game. It's a really cool attacking game. And then we're going to shift gears to something that I think most of us have not seen before. And I think you'll find it pretty interesting. Okay, so this is his game against Frank. Frank is well known. He's a streamer. I think Gotham Chess has worked with Frank quite a bit. And so he was well known going into CoachChamps. Welcome, everybody. For those of you joining, we're going to be looking at a game from CoachChamps as a warm-up, and then another game from CoachChamps is going to inspire basically the rest of the lesson. So thanks for making it. It's a Queen's Gambit declined. I'm going to move quickly through the opening. I could make some commentary, but we have a lot of material to cover today. So I just want to share, Kageyata is playing very sensible moves, prepares this pawn break e4, accomplishes that. Some trades occur. I'm moving a little bit fast. After knight takes, one big thing, if you're newer to the game, is when the knight captures on e4, understandably, we're all going to zoom in. It's like a loud noise or something. It's like, hey, where did that noise come from? And we kind of tune in to where the crisis might be. But I always recommend, as I've talked about in previous classes, we'll naturally zoom in, but we do not naturally zoom out. And what I mean by that is that as you focus on that square, don't forget about the tension on this diagonal. The bishops are having kind of this awkward staring contest, kind of an X-ray staring contest. And the second the knight moves, look out for the floodgates being open. So Kageyata captures by zooming out, played a very good move, captures, and I'm moving quickly because I want to get us to a position. Rook e1, he played knight f6, bishop d3 was played. Just a master tip I'll throw out there. I play the Queen's Gambit. Historically, I've played it quite a bit. A move that might look kind of weird, but a move that I actually like a lot. Not necessarily a killer move in this exact position, but anytime you have a rook on c1 as opposed to a1, this can be an interesting moment to at least consider bishop to b1. Feels really weird, right? To play bishop to b1 because the bishop is kind of, looks a little sidelined. Maybe it doesn't enjoy as much scope, but this is a really good way to create maybe a queen bishop battery at some point. Again, I wouldn't say it's like a killer move here, but I just want to point out, and if you're black, it would be the same situation where if you had a rook here, you could bring your bishop back and create a battery like that. So just an idea that if you play bishop d3, which is perfectly fine and was played in the game, the only thing I am slightly not sure about is whether I want to lead with my bishop or potentially if I play bishop to b1, maybe I would be interested in leading with my queen at some point. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there as a little positional tidbit, but Kageyata's move makes perfect sense, centralizes his bishop, perfectly fine. Rook d8 was played. He played queen c2, so he creates this battery. He completes development. Very good opening. And after the move c5, this is kind of our first warm-up. Now we talk about zooming in. The crisis has been created. There's pressure against d4. And I'd like everyone to take a moment and think, what would you play in this position? And if you're comfortable, share a move with an explanation. What would you play here as white and why? Okay, so a lot of great discussion, great ideas. We're under pressure by a pawn, so thinking about taking it makes sense. One thing I always wonder if I make a trade like this, Perfectly fine, by the way, good move. Who does it benefit most? If I take this way, I can make the argument my knight enjoys a new square, but the rook's guarding it. I would say the rook here is really happy about that trade because the rook now has this open line and it's putting pressure against our bishop. So although taking is a perfectly reasonable move, I always like to think when I'm going to make a trade, am I trading on my terms or am I helping my opponent potentially develop? And on the other hand, I'm noticing a lot of you saying, hey, I like the move d5. And if we only look at the d5 square, we'll say, well, that's a weird move. There's 1, 2, 3 attackers, and we only appear to have one defender, c4. But Kagieta played this because this was the beauty of rook e1, is that he developed the rook to a very active post here, and now this pawn is pinned. So the move d5 is a really good idea. You're crossing the chess equator. You're keeping this rook closed for the time being, so you're not helping that rook, your opponent's rook, become more active. And now we have 1, 2 attackers against this pawn. And so black played queen d6, and white played another great move, knight to g5. And some of you said knight g5 in the chat. Well, here's your moment. We kind of improved on knight g5 by preventing our pawn from being captured. We put pressure on e6, and now I see 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces all participating in the attack, all have, potential energy pointing to the king side, and this pawn is ready to tear open lines. Now I'm going to move through this example a little bit quickly, so please forgive me if I'm moving kind of fast, but I want to make sure we have time to really deep dive what I have prepared today. But one interesting point here from Black's perspective is I highlighted all of the active pieces, and let's also give that pawn a shout out on d5, that they're all participating in the kingside attack or have the potential to do so. Whereas Black has a bishop here biting on granite, as Nimzovich would put it. Look at that rock solid pawn chain. So this bishop is completely useless when it comes to defending the king side. This rook is a spectator, not really doing much. This rook isn't doing much. And so it kind of comes down to the knight being maybe the key defender. And, the queen and this rook might help at some moment, but this is a bad sign. So if you can get all your pieces to kind of create a storm cloud around your opponent's king side, and they don't have a lot of defense, this is a good sign for an attack. And so after the move, knight g5, g6 was not played, h6 was played. But something I want to point out about this pawn chain, like here and here, this is a structure where it looks like, hey, g6 is reasonably solid because there's 2 defenders. What could possibly go wrong? Well, incredibly, there's a tactic here. And I don't want to go too much into the weeds. I just want to show Kagieta's very nice idea that he played in the game. But I just wanted to point out that a move like d takes e6 turns out to be rather powerful. And the reason why is because, yes, I know my queen, the queen can take the bishop. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I just wanted to point out how quickly what looks like a safe pawn can be just torn apart with just one capture. By taking here, I'm threatening f7. So if you don't take me, I'm going to likely take on f7. And if you do take, now all of a sudden, look at that pawn that was protecting g6, no longer so. That becomes a target now on e6 as well, and we can rip open the defense with bishop takes. And the idea is that after you take me, choose your own checkmate. Look at g6. It looked like it was rock solid just 2 moves ago. Now it's hanging, and either you get checkmated in the corner, like so, or I checkmate you this way. Now, if the queen takes, this might become a daily puzzle. You take with check, the king moves here, and this will be our, for the more advanced players that like to grind tactics, this would be a really interesting moment to see what you would play here, what you think white's best move is. And for those of you less experienced with this tactical chaos, I'll show a really instructive moment right after this. So what do you think is white's best move here? So we're wanting to promote, right? That's our dream. If we throw in a check, we're gonna have to calculate, you know, what's going on. We've sacrificed a bishop, so at the very least, can they take and try to survive? Maybe. But if our dream is f8, what's getting in the way? The rook and this rook. The other thing is the queen is under some pressure and it's also protected by this rook. So if I go back, I don't think I explained it too clearly, is that this pawn is doing two things. The f7 pawn, it's guarding g6 with the h pawn, and it's also the only pawn guarding e6. So the reason that that position fell apart so quickly was that once this pawn was overworked, it cannot both defend itself by capturing and continue to support the defense of this pawn. So this pawn was overworked, it was juggling, and that's how that sacrifice worked. Going into this example, after takes, check, and king to g7, this rook has two important jobs. It's protecting the queen, but it's also guarding this promotion square. So incredibly, there's a really cool interference idea. Creative username, Lugando. I see some answers here. Look at this move. Rook e8. Beautiful move. And this whole position collapses very, very quickly. It's just incredible. What is your opponent to do? If they take with the knight, for example, that seems pretty natural. Well, now I take back and I have two queens. So you have a problem. You can't capture both of my queens, right? If you take this one, I can take you. If you take me, maybe I throw in some sort of a check, and maybe you're even looking at a checkmate. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit into the weeds with this example, but I just couldn't resist showing this concept that just like the pawn having two jobs, when a rook or any other piece has two jobs, just like me, I'm a terrible multitasker, you can often overwhelm the defense. And so this rook e8 is a really cool interference concept, which is that now I'm preparing to promote my pawn. That was my dream. And, you know, if you take my queen, look out for the queen being able to promote like so and delivering mate. So anyway, we could spend truly the whole lesson talking about this game. But I just wanted to give you a little taste of what was possible. This game was, what was the time control? Is it 10 plus 5, 10 plus 2? I forget. It's like a 10-minute game with a little bit of increment. So like I'm spending almost as much time as it took to play the game to talk about it. So you have to make practical decisions, but I couldn't resist sharing that idea. But okay, moving forward, after h6, he played check. The king moved here and he sacrificed a knight. So my point is that Kagiyeta knew, he knows all too well how difficult it is. I mean, to be under pressure, you're playing CoachChamps, there's grandmasters analyzing your games, thousands of people are watching. You feel that pressure. You play brilliantly the first game and you're rewarded with a big loss. And that's so frustrating because he played a majority of the game extremely well, was completely winning, but his opponent kept fighting and he ended up losing a very dramatic game. And so it's very easy to kind of go on tilt after that. And this was a game he was able to play later in the tournament. So I just want to give him a big shout out for being able to resurface and define that strength to play a game at this kind of quality level. So now his idea is, look at this. After check, his knight was hanging and he said, go ahead, you can take me. And Frank decided, I don't want any of that. And he moved his rook. But in the game, it's hard to make these choices. Why didn't he take the knight? I think the problem is because of e7 check. And all of a sudden, you have this fork, your rook is under pressure, things are going to fall apart pretty quickly. Like one line, just to keep it simple, you take the rook, promote to a queen, discover the rook's check, and when the king goes here, look at this alignment, you can play rook d1, and you pin the queen to the king. So this is just a really devastating attack. And if you feel like, hey, this is kind of complicated, this is pretty heavy, you're not alone. There's a lot of tactics here. But the main lesson I want you to take from this is, why is this working? It's because all of his pieces are working together. and that Frank's pieces as black are kind of sidelined and they're kind of spectators. So he just showed a brilliant example of harmony here. After check, take, he captured the queen, and after queen to c6, this will be our last moment of this game. What did Kagieta play to basically bring home the full point? You know you're doing well. You've made it through the complications. The king is weak. You've captured some material. But how do you win the one game? Not O-N-E, but W-O-N. The game that you know is winning, but how do you win it? And apologies, appreciate everybody with a really active chat. I'm not able to catch every message in real time, but really appreciate the engagement. White to play. One thing that helps me, there's tons of good moves here, you're right. But one thing that helps me is to think about a dream position. If I could place a piece anywhere, where would I place it? Like any piece you want. Well, the king is nearly mated, right? It can't move here or here because of the pawn and the bishop, right? It can only move to e7 and f8. Notice those two red squares I'm highlighting. They're an attacking distance of a knight. So if you create a little checkmate box in your head and be like, okay, can't move here, 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 or here, all I need to do is figure out how to turn these squares red. And so my dream would be to move diagonally like so. Knight g6. If I can do that, it's mate. That's exactly what Kagieta played. She played knight e5. Attacking the queen, working backwards from the dream. He's threatening mate. And you'd say, well, wait a minute, isn't he blundering a pawn? Well, he's sacrificing a pawn. But his point is, if Frank played this, now he can play knight g6 anyway, and there goes the queen. And so Frank didn't see that. He moved his queen and delivered a checkmate. So very instructive game. Just wanted to give Kagieta some props. I could, like I said, we could probably have like 5 community classes on CoachChamps. Unfortunately, there's only so much content I can share. But just wanted to give him a big heads up and or a big shout out and to give him props that the tournament started in a very difficult, kind of dramatic way, and he did a wonderful job fighting back and coming up with just a beautiful game. So thank you so much for sharing it. And now we're going to look at a position that Lugando made. Lugando made one pawn move, and I just can't shut up about it. I'm just talking about it all the time. And the reason why is because there's so much instructive material to it. And so we're going to build up to understand what this is all about. And it's the type of pawn sacrifice that I don't think is easy to understand, and therefore it's even more complicated to play with any confidence. So let me start with kind of a basic example here. When we talk about pawn sacrifices, let me flip the board. In general, the way I understand pawn sacrifices is I sacrifice a pawn to open up windows or lines for my pieces. A couple examples. I'm moving quickly. Ignore the opening moves. I'm just showing you the concept. This is the Benko Gambit. You sacrifice one pawn. You offer a second pawn. You say, go ahead and take. And now I'm going to make a whole bunch of moves. Feel free to ignore them. So I want to get to a position. This one. What is black doing here? This bishop is putting pressure on the long diagonal pointing to the queen side. The rooks and the queen are all over here on the queen side. So why did I play b5 and a6? Those moves I blitzed out. Is I'm sacrificing these pawns to open up windows for my pieces. This is a general example of why I might give up a pawn or two, is I want my pieces to breathe. I want them to be active. Compare that to the rook on a1 staring at the pawn, right? This is a typical kind of pawn sacrifice. Another line, again, ignore the moves, just want to get to a position. The French defense winnower, known as the poison pawn. I've played this as black with terrible results, by the way. After queen c7 takes, look at this. I'm hanging a pawn and offering a second pawn. Why am I giving up g7? Because I'm opening a window for my rook. So now I have this long-term pressure here. And after taking, I can threaten to check and the game gets crazy. But I'm just showing two examples where I give up a pawn or two to open up a line for my pieces. That is a very typical pawn sacrifice, sacrificing a pawn for piece activity. Now, let me show a position like this. Here, black is up a full pawn, doing fine. The engine gives the evaluation approximately like, I think it was like negative 2.5. So black is almost up the equivalent of a piece because it's a simplified ending. So if Stockfish plays this against Stockfish, black's going to win 100 times out of 100. So this is just clearly good for black, up a pawn. Let me change one detail. Let me move this pawn here. Now we're going to play a game called Guess the Eval. What do you think the engine evaluation is here? This position, negative 2.5, if I remember correctly. This position, go ahead and throw in the chat. And if you're not like too familiar with engine evaluations, you can just put human terms like white's winning or it's equal or black's winning or however you feel about it. But what do you think? Seeing some good answers. The evaluation, according to a quick kind of engine check when I did it the other day, was minus 0.7. So black, and this is perfect play. Remember, two computers playing each other. That's what the eval is saying. If I'm playing, both sides are playing perfectly, negative 0.7. That means comfortable advantage for black, but not winning. So just one change in that structure, and you're already not doing very well from black's perspective. Like you went from minus 2.5 to minus 0.7, meaning you're no longer objectively winning, but maybe you have a slight advantage if you're Stockfish. And now, if I add this to the equation, now I just added a knight and a bishop. This is a really difficult ending to play as black because all of a sudden your bishop is going to have issues finding a way out. And this knight has a really good outpost. It could threaten this weak pawn. And I know this is like an exaggerated example, but we're keeping it simple and clear initially because what we're going to look at is going to be far from that. But why is this working? Even though white's down a pawn, the engine says with white to move, it's, I think, plus 1.3 because of knight g5. And if, let's pretend it's black's move, now it says like equal. So if you're up a pawn and the engine is calling it equal, it means as a human, it's going to be a very hard position for you to play. You're up material, but the engine's like, at best, you have equality. Not a good sign. And the problem with this sacrifice, why this sacrifice, which I haven't explained why it's a sacrifice, how we get there, is usually there's going to be a bishop in the opening. It's going to be blocked. And so you're going to have to push that pawn to try to get your bishop active. And if this pawn is here, it's kind of like double parking. Look at these doubled pawns. To get this bishop out, and it's say natural diagonal here, you need to play e5 and e6. Or you have to move this pawn and develop it. So this is why I'm sharing it with you, this structure. Keep this in mind. We're about to kind of move into some chaos. We're going to look at some complicated stuff. And the way we're going to warm up before we look at Lugando's example is after he played e6, like I said, I see it everywhere. We had a recent simul with National Master Sam Copeland as part of the Improvers Club. And Sam played 10 people at once, and he played someone rated, I think, around 800. And let's take a look at his game. Now, when you look at master level play, it's always funny. It's like, okay, we're going to look at Sam's play, and then Lugando is playing, you know, in the advanced coach champs section. It's kind of funny to be like, what are people over 1,600, 2,000, 2,200 playing? Well, here's National Master Sam Copeland. What is he going to play? Well, if I was working with a beginner, you know, after f6, I would call that the forget about it pawn. Forget about moving the f pawn. It's not a good idea. It blocks the knight. It exposes the king. There's a lot of tactics. So what does the National Master play? f3. And for those of you that know this line, it's called the fantasy variation of the Caro-Kann. And it works if you know exactly what you're doing. But it's definitely an opening I would not recommend playing unless you've really studied it seriously. Because in general, you don't want to move your f-pawn. Forget about moving it. If you're just starting out in chess, take this pawn and keep the f3 square open for your knight. But more advanced players experiment, they come up with tricky stuff. And so this is a big mismatch. It's a national master versus someone that's about 800. So let's be charitable and understanding that black's not going to play the best moves, but it's going to reinforce that structure I talked about a moment ago. Knight f6 turned out not to be a good move because after knight c3, knight bd7, Sam played e5. And now that knight is moving backwards. It has nowhere positive to move. And when it moves back, what do you think the national master played here? What did Sam play next? So a lot of good moves, but the reason I set up the story as I did is to add context to Sam's move that otherwise looks ridiculous. E6. So the national master plays f3, commits a big opening sin, and now just blunders a pawn. Well, it's not quite like that. So here, Sam sacrificed the pawn, not because his king is happy to march up the board and capture this pawn. I assure you, it's not about opening the lines for his king. Maybe later he'll put a rook or a queen here. But unlike the traditional pawn sacrifice I was sharing earlier, this pawn sacrifice is to really mess up the opponent's development and to compromise king's safety. There's no immediate knockout, as we'll see in Lagando's game, but it's very hard for black to untangle and to complete development in a harmonious way. So here, if black gets another move, they're going to play e5. Why would they play that? Because they want to open up this diagonal for the bishop. So Sam, making several pawn moves, plays f4, clamping down on that square. And so the lesson here, it's unlikely you'll get this exact position. I don't think I've ever seen this exact position before other than Sam's game. But what you will see will be unprotected, loose pawns, maybe doubled pawns, and maybe a weak square that you want to attack. When you have a target like e6, something you want to attack in the future, try to freeze the target. Try to control the square in front of the weakness. So the reason you play f4 is that way you're not attacking a moving target. You freeze the pawn. If it ever tries to move, you can take it, right? And that way you're going to start targeting it. And so this was a move Sam played. And after knight gf6, knight f3, the most important lesson I can give everyone, maybe I think it's unlikely you'll get this exact position, but when you are up material, do not hold on to it like it's the end of the world if you lose it. Yasser Seirawan, grandmaster, former US champion, gave this great description. Imagine you're in a hot air balloon and you start sinking. You're weighed down by your material. Yasser's point is throw some weight out of the hot air balloon and you'll start to rise again. And so his idea is if you can return material in order to say complete development, make your king safe, that's an advantage with material that you can actually give it back. Because I know from my experience, my own games and working with students, when I'm up a pawn or a couple pawns, I rarely want to give back the material. And I get that. If you can hold on to the material comfortably, hold on to it. But when you're in this position as black, don't be like I'm up a pawn. Basically be like, I'm potentially down a king. My pieces are sluggish. I need to get into the game. Think of Yasser and the hot air balloon. As you start to sink, be willing to give up material. So here white or black made a really, really big mistake and a very instructive mistake. They said, why did Sam play knight f3? He developed his knight, and if I give Sam another move, he's going to play knight g5. And then I lose my pawn. So totally understandable error. If you're playing this position, maybe play g6. Get your bishop out. Try to castle. If they play knight g5, is this the end of the world? Hold on to that pawn and eventually give it back if you need to. Play bishop g7 and castle. By the way, I'm going to show a game where I had to encounter this problem. So that's kind of the end story. So far, we're going to see a lot of grief for the side dealing with this. And we're going to finish with one example where you can actually fight back pretty successfully. So after the move knight f3, when in doubt, you're not sure what to do not push a pawn, right? I push this pawn for a specific reason. I want to move my bishop, fianchetto, and castle. It's the only reason I'm thinking about pushing this pawn. Black panic, said knight g5 is scary. I'm going to stop it. And when this happens, look at that square. We go back to this moment, g6, most solid square on the board, right? So when you play e6, Sam has now weakened the g6 square. It's only protected by one pawn. And after h6, now nothing's protecting it. What did Sam do? Bishop d3, threatening checkmate. So black says, okay, I'm going to play knight b6. And what would you play here as white? Feel free to share a move and an idea. Yeah, it was close, Lugando. Great job, everybody. Whole bunch of 95s in the air. Just so people know the format, by the way, the chessboard is the left corner for me. And then there's the notation and some files, and then there's the chat. So just want to let you know that I'll do my best to monitor chat, but it's like on the other side of the board. So I'm going to do my best. So if you don't always see a response from me, just a reminder, I try to be super active in the Improvers Club and specifically Ask Coach, Ask Community. So if you ask a question that I wasn't able to answer, someone in the chat wasn't able to answer, feel free to reach out after the class in our Improvers Club, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. So a lot of people would say, well, why not bishop g6 check? It's a good move. Nothing wrong with that move. But then the opponent's king gets to run. So if you think about your opponent's move, what do they want? They want to move their king here and try to run away. It goes back to Kagieta's example again, where I create that checkmate box in my head and say, these are the only two squares, or sorry, this square, and this square are all possible for the king, right? Kind of this triangle. If I play knight e5, I instantly remove both squares. And now the king can move nowhere. So this is the only safe square. I'm ready to play checkmate on the next move. So if you give me one more move, I'm going to play checkmate. And if you block and you say, okay, at least I can block. Here's a good example of zooming in. Hey, look at all that pressure there on e4. We zoom in on that tension, zoom out. Did that knight have a job? It's guarding this square. So as you try to stop one checkmate, you may allow another. In the game, by the way, Sam played knight e5. His opponent played knight c4. So actually, Lugando, you got to see it. Now bishop g6 works with mate. So kind of a complicated opening, this f3 thing. But the main lessons I want you to take is that e6 is often a very compelling sacrifice if the bishop is unable to take or has the ability to enter the game quickly. So this move, to me, feels a little counterintuitive. It's not the kind of move you see every day. And it's all about restricting the opponent's development and putting pressure on the king. Okay, so what inspired this? It's funny, just the timing was perfect. I just happened to catch Lugando's game while I was working. And so this was the game against the Giant, the top player. Lugando, I think on paper, was like a, 250 point underdog. Even not that ratings matter that much, but it was a significant rating gap. And Lugando is Improver of the Month, and we did a lesson together, and I know he put in some tremendous preparation. And after the move bishop f5, Lugando plays h4. And if you haven't seen this move before, you'd be like, this lesson is bizarre. We're talking about national masters and advanced tournament players moving all their pawns willy-nilly and not developing. Well, this move was played by the legend Mikhail Tal in the 1960s against Botvinnik. And this turns out to be a really, really sharp way to play. And the idea is, if you play e6, which is a normal looking move, you get your bishop outside of the pawn chain and then you close the chain. Now you surprisingly lose a piece. You can attack the rook. I attack you. You run back, h5. You lose a full piece. So if you play the Caro-Kann as black and you see the move h4, my recommendation, play h5. It's the most solid move. And there's a lot of ways here for white to play. But the other thing I like about this pawn sacrifice is this taught me something about opening theory that I didn't know. Sometimes when you're playing openings, you just sort of play by memorization or just play by habit. And so here, one of the main moves is bishop d3, where white puts pressure on the bishop. Black responds in kind by taking. You take with the queen, and then e6 is a move. And I've played this as black a lot, but I didn't understand fully why. I just know, create your pawn chain, you know, open some lines for your kingside pieces and get on with your life. But what would happen if black played knight d7? What would be a good move here for white? I never asked this question until after looking at Lugando's game. Very good, everybody. So today's lesson is all about e6. And so the idea is, if you take me, now that's checkmate. And if you don't take me, knight f3 is an interesting move, but you could also just take, get the king to capture, and look how exposed that king is to attack. So this is an example where I didn't consciously know the move that I know is correct, e6, is one way to look at it is it's a book move. It keeps your center solid and you're ready to develop. But the other thing I didn't think about was e6 might be a very cool move here. Very nice threat. So just wanted to throw that out there. Now in Lugando's game, somebody said, what about h6? You're in luck. This was what was played. I think it's technically playable, but in my opinion, I think h5 is very solid, and this is the way you'll probably get your best chances. h6 was played. What did Lugando play? g4. His opponent attacked f3. And after the bishop moved to h7, what did Lugando play here? What do you think? Artem says, today's lesson, play e6 and be happy. Yeah, the French defense. Play e6 on move 1, right? e6. And that's why I kind of primed us to look at all those other examples. If you don't know this move, it's not something you just find over the board. Like, oh yeah, that move makes sense. I just give up a pawn. And so after e6, his opponent played queen d6. He could have captured right away. And he captured with check. I should make the point that after taking here, I don't know, Lugando, what you would have played. You can let me know. You could play f4 to try to stop this pawn from moving, but I think a really good move here for white is bishop d3. And the reason that I like bishop d3 is I'm immediately putting pressure on that bishop. I'll be happy to take it and put the rook on this really awkward h7 light square. And if you take back, now this queen is going to cause a lot of problems. So this was an interesting position. Yeah, oh, it's a known move. Yeah, I don't play e4. I got to start playing e4 more. Lugando's more booked up than I. So he was ready. He said, I'm going to play bishop d3 and attack. So again, this is just a very interesting pawn sacrifice. After queen d6, take, he played f4. Why did he do that? He's way behind in development. Why isn't he developing his pieces? Because e7 is what we call kind of a backward pawn that, I mean, technically a backward pawn is a pawn that's moved and then it's not supported by any neighboring pawns. But we can say that this pawn feels backwards. It's not supported by any other pawn. And it's going to be a target that if Lugando gets his rook here, that's going to be a long-term issue. So what black would love to do is e5. Go for a pawn break with e5. So he plays f4 to clamp down that square and also to open a square for his knight. It's really funny to look at a game like this and be like, if you had to do like, guess the elo, you know, it's like, what are the ratings of these two players? Like one side is only moving their pawns. The other side has moved their king on like, you know, move 6 or something. You know, you might think it's two beginners, but far from it. These are players competing in this advanced tournament in CoachChamps. And so after e6, Lugando plays knight f3, knight d7, tons of good moves here. I really like what he played, knight e5. And the reason I like it is because he's making the argument, I want you to trade on my terms. We're not going to go through his whole game, but I do encourage people to check out the game, because in the end game, even then, there's an opportunity for rooks to be traded, and he just doesn't do it and says, nope, you're going to trade on my terms. And he's very aware of just this idea of like, give your opponent enough choice, they're going to go wrong. So he plays knight e5, and his idea is, I want you to take on my terms. I want you to take my knight, so that way I can attack your queen, and more importantly, open the F file for my pieces. So very good move, knight e5. Black refused to capture. He played bishop d3, puts pressure on the bishop, takes, knight e5, and takes. And now comes a critical moment. After queen d7, if I had to ask you, where do you think this king should live? Where should it spend the rest of its days? I think a very strong argument could be made that you should castle queenside. You have a well-built house, a nice foundation of 3 pawns, but interestingly enough, he didn't do this. And one thing I recommend, how to find good moves and how to plan. Lugondo has a very tempting move here that he did not play. After playing that e6 and making all the light squares weak, you might be tempted to say, what about queen g6 check? It's not a bad move. But one thing is, when you're under pressure, you're the one being attacked. Be happy with a queen trade. If you can get the queens off, then all of a sudden, if this happens, you're no longer going to get crushed. You're not going to get mated. And the king is actually more or less ready for the endgame. So I want to play queen g6. This is how I'm going to build a plan. I'm looking at my most forcing move, but I don't like queen f7. What should I do? Lugondo answered, I'm home. Hey, where's everybody? All the squares are empty around my king. But amazingly, his king is fine, perfectly fine. And by castling, he now guards that f7 square. And so he's putting the opponent under tremendous pressure, and he's threatening check. The rook can crash in, and his opponent played queen e7. You might wonder, why queen e7? Why not castling? There seems to be a bug. Why can't I castle my king? Because the king moved earlier. Check. Remember that idea. So you can't castle out of it. After queen e7, Lugondo played check. And now, to his credit, I really like how he handled this position, is rather than rushing to attack, he just completes development with knight c3 and puts the opponent under pressure, saying, what are you going to do? If you're going to take me, I take you with check. Then all of a sudden, the king is skewered. I'm going to take that rook. Things are not feeling great. And after queen e8, I think we hit a very important moment. So we're getting to the end of the example. This is a very interesting pawn sacrifice. His opponent didn't take it, but the spirit is still here, creating the light square weaknesses. Black plays queen e8 and says, shall we trade queens? How would you respond, and why? I'll answer your question in a minute, Anthony. It's a good question. Very good, everybody. So basically, the idea is, what does your opponent want? They want you to trade queens. And Lugondo says, no chance. I'm going to play rook f7. And this leaves such a stunning impression. Just to answer that question, and then I'll go back to finish. Somebody asked, Anthony was asking about, why not rook f7 immediately? Like, why did Lugondo play knight c3, I think is what you're asking. Like, why didn't he do this first? And that way you tie down the queen. Well, I don't know, Lugondo, you have to speak to this, but were you concerned about the perpetual check here? Like taking the pawn? Do you remember this moment in your game? Because you played kind of a chill move. You developed your knight, you didn't go for the kill, and rightfully so, you weren't ready for it. But do you remember this moment if you spent any time on rook f7? and the moves are the same. Well, if I understand correctly, the issue, and this gets a little bit deeper into the water, I have to admit, but my understanding is that if you allow this capture in check, black might be able to escape with king d7. And the idea is, yes, you captured my bishop, and yes, my rook is hanging, but then I have queen e1 check. If you go here, maybe I have queen e2, and it's very hard to escape. So I don't want to say that castling with your roof blown open in your house is not without risk. But my understanding is that if you play this move now and I take, there's chances for perpetual. And the difference is by playing knight c3, not that you're going to figure this all out in a game in 10, right? Is that now, if you're allowed to, play rook f7, as was played in the game, that line isn't going to work. So I'll just leave that for the interested viewers to check this out. You can look at Lugando's games in the CoachChamps article. If anyone wants to share a link to his game in the chat, go ahead. So people want to look at it a little bit more. But for those of you wanting to deep dive, the big difference is after rook f7 and takes, I want to be able to run my king to d3 and be protected by my bishop and my knight. So it's a very complicated example, but if my knight is here, imagine my king floating to this square. There's ways for the knight to block checks and the bishop can block. So just bookmark this. I don't want to get lost in the weeds, but it was a very good question. But to resurface, what did we do? Lugando wanted to play queen g6 check, but didn't want to allow the queens to be traded. So he castled. Now he guards f7. Now he has pressure here. And after the queen move, he played check. And then he played rook, knight c3, excuse me, and then rook f7. And this is a great spot to stop. And then I'm going to show you a game where I played very quickly, where I had to deal with this e6 nonsense. And I say nonsense in an affectionate way. It's a very good, annoying move to keep in your arsenal. And it's super frustrating to play. If you don't believe me, ask black's pieces. Look at this. We're on move 18. Black's pieces are ready for the next game. It's like they're setting up the game for the board for the next game. And this is a position where Lugando put his opponent under pressure, very hard to defend. He captured a pawn, went on to win a great game. So all of this came from this really cool concept of e6, this move. So I created all this material. I knew I was going to do this on Friday, today. Last week, I played in a tournament in St. Louis, and I'm playing the Caro-Kann as black. And so I had already noticed Sam's example. Sam Copeland, National Master Sam, had that E6 game, and I'm seeing it everywhere. And so now I travel to St. Louis and think, okay, I'm going to play this tournament. I'm a lifelong French defense player, but I decided to start playing the Caro-Kann. And I'm playing an opponent in round one who is like 1850 USCF, so very strong tournament player. I played knight to c6, pin. I played bishop d7. And can anyone possibly guess what white's next move was in a 90 plus 30 second classical game? I told you I can't get away from this idea. I wasn't even trying. Like, I'm not even going to talk about e6. I won't bring it up this weekend at all, I promise. And what does my opponent play? E6. So we're finishing today on the resilient side. If your opponent plays e6, don't resign. I'm not losing here. It's a scary move to face. But if we go all the way back to Kagieta's first example, overwhelming a defender. If a piece has even one job, there's a chance you can overwhelm it on the very next move. Bishop d7 has a very important job. The knight was pinned. There's two attackers. Defend. After this move e6, I cannot both take the pawn and protect my knight. So I take, and now we see this idea again. I have that rotten structure. My bishop is annoyed. My other bishop is annoyed. And so after the move bishop takes, I take with the pawn. Why? Because if I take this way, the bishop has two jobs. Look how quickly those tactics can show up. don't hang the pawn. So I captured here. In the game, queen h5 was played. I just want to point out, after queen e2, that would be a way to, use that open file that you sacrifice the pawn with the queen to attack e6. This was a moment where Yasser Seirawan came to mind, the hot air balloon. I can push the river. I can desperately hold on to this pawn, right? But I think a much stronger move for black is e5. My hot air balloon is sinking. Look at Lugando's game, and move, 18, where all these pieces are stuck. I don't want that to happen to me. So I play e5. This is what I was going to play against my opponent. And after they take, I would play queen b8. And the idea is I've returned a little bit of material. The hot air balloon starts to elevate again, thanks to removing this pawn. And now my bishop has a diagonal. I'm offering a trade of queens. So if they take, then my rook is really active and I start to develop. I start to unwind. So I was ready to play that move. And my opponent said, no, you don't get to do that. Check. Forces me to push the pawn. Attacks my rook. I go here. And after bishop f4, my opponent gives me another chance to hold on to that pawn. What do? I ignore it. I played bishop g7, a much stronger move. So for those of you that play against the London, d4, bishop f4, if you can meet a queen bishop move with queen b6, this can be really strong. I have to admit, I completely missed this move, queen b6. I'm hitting the space that bishop left behind. So that way I develop a piece. I'm threatening the pawn. That would have been a good move, according to the engine. I was so laser focused on completing development, I didn't even think about that. I played here. I said, please take that pawn. And he said, okay, I'll take my pawn. Take back. And when you're under pressure, when your opponent's queen is knocking on your door, what is a really good defensive plan when dealing with an annoying queen? Yep. Trade. Saw some people nodding their heads on camera. Perfect. We're all aligned. Offer a trade. Queen d7. Absolutely. And that's what I did. And if my opponent captured this way, then I would take with the knight and open up the fire-breathing bishop. My opponent moved back. And now I could have castled. Instead, I played knight e4. Why did I do that? Because I'm immediately putting pressure on my opponent. And I have to admit something I learned from this game. Play active moves, meaning forward moves first. How do I improve my position? My bishop has potential. My knight has potential in the center. Do both. Move the knight, threaten the pawn, and give your opponent the opportunity to go wrong. Ask questions. And I was very surprised by my opponent's answer. I thought that he was going to play c3, and then I was going to castle and attack his bishop. That was my plan. But the funny thing is, your opponent might not play what you think. And I have to admit, I was very surprised to see knight d2. It's like, really? Okay. Well, I can take this pawn. Before I do, I'll play a tempo move. I'll castle. Moved here. Now I take the pawn. He spent a long time. He captured. I captured back, castled, and I bring my bishop here. Now, as we finish, last couple minutes, I just want to show you one last critical moment. I appreciate everybody hanging out with me for an hour. We covered so much. Appreciate everyone's energy. I'll show you one last moment where I thought I was in some trouble, and I think I worked out a good solution. And then we'll kind of recap what this is all about. We get into some kind of tactical mess here. He plays check. What do? Trade queens. And this is kind of the last question I'd like to ask everybody. Here you are in an endgame. You're up in exchange. You know you're doing well, but your opponent's doing a great job fighting. He's putting you under some pressure. He's asking me some questions. How do you play as black and why? How do you come up with a plan here? Your opponent is changing the script. They're making the game more complicated. Black to move. Okay, seeing some good answers. Give everyone a moment here. E3 is very creative with the idea that now you sacrifice a pawn, but you're opening up your rook. That's a pretty strong idea. I have to confess, I didn't think about it at all during the game. But now that I look at it, good point. E3, very strong move. I came up with another thought. I don't know how many people are thinking, hey, this is kind of unfortunate that I have 2 pawns hanging, and I'd rather not give my opponent either pawn. That was my thinking. But credit to those that said, let's get dynamic and let's sack a pawn with E3. Open lines. It's a very smart move because you have 2 rooks, so open lines for your rooks. My take was if I play here, I'm staring at that pawn, kind of depressing, and I don't like giving up this pawn. But then I realized, hey, what's the most important pawn? It's this one. It's more advanced. I want to support it. And after I play this move, my pawn is not hanging. It looks like it's hanging, but it isn't. So I played this move and learned something from the class today, by the way. E3, I think is a very cool move. Nice job for those of you thinking about it. I went here and I was willing to give up a little bit of material because it really isn't giving up material. What do I mean by that? If he does nothing, I can, of course, guard that pawn. He takes, and now I swing back. So by capturing that pawn, he's actually opening up the C file for my rook, which is a big mistake. And if he tries to block, well, that self-pins. Then I go there, for example. That's a big problem. And after he captured, I take back. So just a good lesson mentally that you're like, I don't want to lose either pawn. You get really worried. Again, shout out to the dynamic answer E3. I like that. But I also like how I handle it, which is I went here to say, I'm going to guard the pawn that matters most. And if you capture a pawn, you're opening up windows. Going back to pawn sacrifices, the traditional ones, not the E6 creative ideas, is that now that you captured this pawn, you've opened the floodgates. I didn't blunder. I didn't celebrate back rank mate and lose my bishop. I went here. I captured. And the last plan of the day, get your king here. H. Hart, I think, asked me the other day about endgame practice and like how to work on endgames. And it's always tricky because there's like theoretical endings like king and pawn, and then there's practical endings like this. And how do you make a decision in a practical ending? Activity, 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 restriction, restriction, restriction. What do I mean by that? Activate your rook, activate your king, restrict your opponent's king if you can. So I knew it was going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 moves to hit me here. After this, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 moves. So our kings meet. I keep him under control. And now I play rook e2. And this is where like Jeremy Silman's endgame course is helpful. If you study the king and pawn endings, you can think about Fox and the chicken coop, where you can kind of throw a pawn here, get the king to babysit, and then bring your king over here to gobble up all the pawns. So basically here he resigned, but had he have done this, I would have just entered the king and pawn ending, where now I just move over here to take the pawn and ready to push it up the board. So just wanted to leave on a positive note that don't freak out if your opponent plays e6, but understand why they're doing it. They're trying to ruin your structure. They're trying to attack your king. And remember the words of Yasser Seirawan. The hot air balloon starts to sink. One of the biggest advantages of a material advantage is you have the opportunity to give it some or all of it back at an opportune moment. So really jam-packed content today. I know we went into kind of a little bit of deep diving throughout, so really appreciate everybody being very positive and engaging here. Hope to see you in the Improvers Club. And if you have any questions or feedback or ideas for new classes, always feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to ask any questions in Ask Coach community in the forum, and I'll be happy to answer you there. And just want to thank everybody for your time. I also want to give a shout out to the Improvers Marathon. This is kind of our first time doing an organized online tournament that you can play on a weekly basis. So check that out in the Improvers Club, the Improvers Marathon. And we'll probably have some more content to share going into the next year. And the very last thing I will mention, I have December 12th written down on my calendar. So next community class will be scheduled December 12th at 9 a.m. CST, same time as today. It could change, but that's the most likely date. So thank you, everybody, for spending your Friday with me. I hope you gained some insights, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I will see you in the Improvers Club. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.